46. I don't think we need to introduce ourselves. So the first item, and the only item on the agenda, is our presentation by Sara Christensen from Ideal Consulting concerning the engagement survey results for the city employees. The floor is yours.
Great, thank you. So glad to see some of the folks in the room today. Just want to kind of set the stage for what I want to go through today. There's three parts of my presentation, and it's going to be fairly high level, aggregate information. But if you have specific questions, please interrupt and ask those. If I don't have the answer in front of me, I'll take notes here and get that back to you. So I'm hoping this will be more of a discussion than just me up here presenting data, because that can get a little dry. But the three objectives here are to really go over the aggregate employee engagement scores that came out of the survey that went out. We had a really good participation. I don't have the exact percentage number in front of me, but it was in the higher ranges, which was good. We had representation from all departments, but there were some that were more represented than others. Hello. The second thing I want to talk about is the POV interviews that we did. I want to say back in May and June. I met with quite a few individuals. I think the number ended up being 25 or 26. And we had representation from, I believe, all departments, but some departments there was only one person that came in. So I did talk to folks, but don't know that I got a well-rounded view of every department. But I am going to share with you things that I heard in those interviews. I'm going to share with you the questions that we asked and the answers I got, and again, at a very high level. I'm going to be talking about themes that came out, impressions that I was given from folks. I try not to get too involved in just one person's perspective. I try to look for the common themes and things that I heard over and over. So I'll share those with you. And then at the very end, I want to talk about recommendations. Again, when we first started this journey, we weren't quite sure what we were going to do as phase 2. These will be some of my recommendations for phase 2. Doesn't mean that's what's going to happen. Just means that that's my opinion of where you might go next. Fair enough? Should we jump in? All right. Oops, sorry, went too far. Okay, so I want to start with a generalized definition of what employee engagement is. It's a term that's thrown out a lot and can be really misunderstood if you're not clear on what it is that we're measuring. Employee engagement is the emotional connection between the employee and the work they do, the people they work with, and the people that they serve. And it's sometimes kind of confused with employee satisfaction. And employee satisfaction is a very different thing. Satisfaction is I like how things are going and I really don't want them to change because I'm comfortable and I'm happy. Engagement is almost I want things to move and get better. I'm really engaged in what's happening. I understand our customers. I understand my coworkers. So it's a different animal. And the questions that we use to get to that emotional connection with the work we do, the people we work with, and the people we serve are based in a lot of research and science. It goes back to Carl Jung, who originally did a lot of work, he's long passed, but did a lot of work around personality and how you measure personality, which gave work to the Myers-Briggs, which if you've ever taken that, that's based in the same science. This is also based in the same science as the work that Gallup does with the StrengthsFinder assessment and their Q12. So it's not just random questions that we thought would be interesting to have an answer to. They're very scientific and they're very predictive. And that's a term you're going to hear, that you probably hear a lot recently with all of the social media out there, all the marketing and big data. What predictive analytics means is that you have a data point or an answer to a question that is statistically correlated to an outcome of desire. For example, let's say the marketing community says people who buy blue shirts tend to also buy blue shoes. Well, if you're selling blue shoes, that's information that you want to have, right? You want to know who's buying those blue shirts so that you can market to them. In the employee engagement world, what it means is that someone who answers highly positive on one of these questions, it's more predictive that they will be more highly positive in performance. So they've related these questions to productivity, customer retention, workplace safety, and talent retention. So decreasing turnover, decreasing accidents at work, happy customers or constituents, and productivity, meaning growth at a efficient level. So we want to look at these scores in and of themselves as being reflective of how people think and feel, but it's also reflective of how we can predict that they will perform. And so if we want to move the organization forward, be more productive, have greater customer satisfaction, a safer environment, and greater retention, this is data points that can help us develop a strategy to move forward. Now there are some cautions with what I've seen organizations do with data that isn't helpful. And what isn't helpful is looking at employee engagement as an outcome in itself. Where, if you went to Walmart and they said, hey, our employees are really engaged, our employment scores went up 20% this year, so we're going to increase our prices 20%. Would that fly with you? No. No. Employee engagement is a strategy for other things. If you went into a Walmart and they said, hey, our products are 25% or 20% more reliable, they're going to last you 20% longer or whatever, and therefore the price is higher, you might buy that. So employee engagement in and of itself isn't the goal. It's a strategy to achieve our goals, which is really, the definitions of what we define success as. So we'll talk more about that as we move forward. But I compare employee engagement kind of to a cold, if you will. If a child comes up to you and says, Mommy, Daddy, Aunt, Uncle, whoever, I don't feel so good. The first thing you do is you put your hand on their forehead, right? Why do we do that? We want to see if they're warm, right? And doing that doesn't tell us what the fever is, doesn't give us a number, doesn't tell us if they have the cold or the flu, doesn't make the child, it probably comforts them, but it doesn't make their tummy ache go away, and it doesn't diagnose what's going on, right? It doesn't give you treatment options. Doing this doesn't tell you what you should do next, it just gives you information on what more information you need. So if the child feels warm, you go and grab a thermometer and get an actual number so that you can call the doctor and tell them what the actual number is, right? If there's not a warmth, then you start asking more questions. Does your tummy hurt? What were you doing? Employee engagement surveys are the same way. Sometimes we put too much weight on them. It's just a data point to help us understand how employees think and feel in a time frame and help us decide what questions or actions do we take next. Any comments on that? All right, so that's our common understanding of what we're looking at. I'm going to have you hand those out. This is the executive summary that some of you will be receiving. In here is a lot of charts and data and information. I want to teach you how to read that before you dig in, because this probably looks colorful, but you might not understand what it's telling you. So I chose one of the questions, and this is aggregate data. And when I say aggregate data, that means everyone who took the survey. In your executive report, you'll see it broken down in many different ways, but for purposes of today, for time considerations, we're going to just look at aggregate data. Okay? So I chose the question, I would recommend the City of Wisconsin Rapids as a great place to work, because that is a generalized question that you're going to hear across many different forums. If you've ever, shopped somewhere and taken a survey, they typically ask, would you recommend this as a great place to shop? Would you recommend this is a great place to live. You guys might ask that question of your residents here. It's a very standardized question to get a general feel for the overall emotions of your employee base. So the blue to red is how people responded. So the dark blue in the bottom left-hand corner is folks who strongly agree. And obviously that's always the goal. We want folks to strongly agree because that indicates that they are at a higher level of engagement. And it's hard to get someone over that hump. Human nature is to be a little more towards the center, so the extremes are really giving you a lot of information that people really feel that way. So 6% of those who responded to this question strongly agreed. 30% agreed, which means they're kind of standing on the cliff, catching things, watching stuff, waiting to determine, am I going to jump into the deep end or am I going to back away? That's really your area of opportunity, is the lighter blue. Those folks want to be engaged. They're in a positive mind frame and just need a little bit of a push to jump off into the deep end. So that's a really exciting number. The 39% in the yellow are folks that answered neutrally. They're neither agreed nor disagreed. They're kind of in the middle, just hanging out there seeing what's going to happen. The orange, the 14%, is those who disagree. And the red is the percentage of folks who strongly disagree. So the dark blue are folks who are engaged. The red are those folks who are actively disengaged. And in between are our opportunities to move folks. Yes?
How many people altogether?
I can get that number for you. I'm sorry, I have it. I just didn't look at it before I came here. It was a high percentage of your employee base. So it was a good...
80%. 80% is how many number? I'm just wondering.
I will get that for you.
6% of what? 30% of what?
I will get you that number. Sorry.
Okay.
I forgot to look at that before I came in. But you're right, it was around 80%, which is a great number. So that's kind of how you read this. And this question is kind of, if you want to look to one question to give you a feel, an overall feel, this is the one. But if you go into your packet, and the first section in your packet is demographics, which again is on percentages. It's not actual numbers, but it gives you the departments that participated, the tenure of the folks that participated. And then the next page is the aggregate scores for each question. So you can look at how did we do in each area. And I apologize that the colors aren't as distinctive on this. My printer's not as great as your monitor here, but you can see that the lower left hand is the strongly agrees, and then the agrees, and then the neutrals, disagrees, and strongly disagrees. Now, what I've done with that information is I've put it into a score. And again, this is a number that is determined by the data. It's not a raw number of 5 people, 7 people. It's a formula, a scientific formula, behind the responses that we got that can give you an understanding of the overall organization. So if you look at, these are each of the questions, starting with, I would recommend Wisconsin Rapids as a great place to work. At work, I am challenged to grow professionally. At work, I am recognized when I do excellent work. I have great confidence in the City of Wisconsin Rapids' future. My coworkers have my back. At work, I have the chance to use my strengths. My coworkers share my values, and I understand what is expected of me at work. So I can share the background formula with you. It's pretty complex, but it comes out with a score for your organization in each question so that you could, whoops, sorry. I realized I was a touch screen here. That you can come back and look at, okay, where are our strengths? Where are areas of opportunity, and where are our, challenges? And so your strengths are in the dark blue and the light blue. The opportunities are in the yellow, and the concerns are in the red. And that's simply based on the scores. Now, a lot of people ask me, well, you know, that's just time and place. Maybe we were going through a rough period that time, or maybe there was a situation that had gotten people happy or upset. Absolutely, and that definitely impacts these numbers. But keep in mind, a high score is not the goal. It's the feeling that the employees have that drives their performance. So let's say a blizzard impacts your scores. I doubt it does, but let's say it does, okay? And we did a survey during a blizzard. A lot of people would say, well, those numbers aren't valid because it was taken during the blizzard. Well, they are valid because we're still performing through that blizzard. That's a part of our work. And those are the challenges that we must deal with on a daily basis, good or bad. So the numbers during the good and bad times are just as important as the numbers during everyday times, because that's what performance is. Okay? So we have some things we can look at. And again, there's a lot of information behind each question, but this gives you an idea of how they responded. And then when you go through in your packet, it's broken down by department. I don't want to get too deep into that here, but there's definitely variances depending upon what department individuals identify as. Questions on that? What do you see that excites you, or as an opportunity, or do you see anything that surprises them? No. See in Jeopardy.
Looks like what their work functions are.
Yeah. Yeah, and that came through pretty loud and clear, that most people really understand what's expected of them.
I sense there's a concern about being recognized for excellent work.
Yep.
You know,
And
response.
that's, I do these surveys with a lot of organizations, and I call that the tanker question, because almost every time it's the one that comes in the lowest. Because, and we can get deep into the whys of it, but for an employee to feel like they're recognized for doing quality work is much different than what we consider employee praise and recognition. The things that we do as an organization typically do not drive that area. You know, Employee of the Month, or service awards, or Employee of the Year, whatever, aren't shown to move that number. And we can talk more about what things do move that number. Two things up here really ring out for me. Besides that, yes, people know what their work is. And the first one is that overall question is the one we had the lowest score on. And that is an overall question. So that really concerns me. The other that I found interesting was my coworkers have my back is in yellow. Because in a municipality like this, where you've got police, you've got fire, you've got folks out there on doing construction, which is a highly dangerous function. If we don't have that trust level that our employees have our back, that really impacts the safety of your organization, especially in fire and police. And EMT response. Do you guys have ambulance, or is that through the hospital? Oh, you do? Okay, yep. So normally in a municipality that has those services, it's kind of like the in the trenches, if you've got a war buddy that you were in the trenches with, your friends for life, that kind of mentality usually shows up here in a fairly high number. So that's something that I found curious. Any other questions or comments?
I don't know, it kind of looks like it's a pretty crappy place to work. I mean, as council president, I'm kind of embarrassed about that.
There's some work to be done. Work to be done. And the good news is in the yellow and the light blue. That there's folks who aren't disengaged. It's hard to move someone from red to dark blue. That takes a lot of effort. and usually is not successful. But when you've got folks that are blue and yellow, they're still committed, they're still here, there's still hope. That's where you can really dig in and have an impact. So that's where the good news lies.
What's the bad news?
Huh?
What's the bad news if that's the good news?
To me, there are, like I said, there are concerns. The coworkers having my back is a concern, and the recommending this as a place to work is a concern. So, like I said, this is just a data point, which is why I then follow up and do point of view interviews. I like to talk to employees to find out why they think and feel the way they do, and find out what's going on that's making them feel that way. And I had a lot of great conversations. I was a little scared at the beginning because there was, I guess, could you call it controversy? That's probably too strong of a word. But there was maybe a misunderstanding about the confidentiality of this. And I've had organizations that I've worked with that have had concerns about that, but not to this level. And the pains that we went to communicate the confidentiality and anonymity of that are more than I've had to do at any other organization. Why that is, I'm not sure. But it's indication that this was a bit unnerving for some folks. And it'd be interesting to find out more about why. I heard from the folks I met with some whys, but again, I met with just a handful of the organizations. So the insights that I got are from that group of folks that were willing to come forward. But I was told by a lot of those folks that there were quite a few employees who weren't willing to come forward. True or not true, I have no indication, but that's what I was told. So I met with, like I said, I think 25 or 26. Some departments, it was just one individual. We were pretty heavy in public works, and which meant a lot of people came from that department, so I got a lot of information from there. We also had quite a response from administration, so I had quite a bit of information there. But I believe every department at least sent one person. So let's dig into what they had to say. And again, I asked 4 questions, but I encouraged the employee to take the conversation where they wanted it to go, to tell me the things they think I needed to know, short of, and I made this very clear, short of talking about wages, because I couldn't do anything about it, so I didn't want to waste our time talking about it, and short of throwing anyone under the bus. I tried to make it pretty clear that this was not an opportunity to come and try and get someone in trouble. I'm not going to share names or departments that gave me the feedback that I got. But again, I'm going to try and protect anonymity as much as possible. But you might be able to connect dots. Please don't spend your emotional energy trying to figure out who said what. That's a waste of your emotional energy, and it's not valuable. And what if you're wrong? So I encourage you to just take this at face value. There is no benefit to try and figure out who said what. And I also encourage you, human nature is to try to dismiss things. When you said, wow, that kind of hurts, yeah, some of this is going to hurt. Some of it's going to be really good news, some of it's going to hurt. Human nature is to dismiss that hurts, so you're going to want to do that. I encourage you not to, because this is not about anyone being right or wrong. This is about how employees think and feel. And however they think and feel is right for them, and it's true for them, even if they have their facts wrong, it still impacts how they think and feel, which impacts their performance. So you may have information about a situation that an employee doesn't, and you may know that they're way off base because they don't have that information. That doesn't matter. Don't dismiss how they think or feel, because whatever they think and feel, right or wrong, it's impacting their work. So do everything in your power not to dismiss the information, even when it's hard to hear. So the first question I asked was, how do we define success and how do we know if we're successful? And I use the term we very purposefully. And I bet 90% of the people I talked to said, well, who do you mean? Who's we? And I would answer the question, whoever we is to you. Because that question about my coworkers have my back and the idea of being accepted in a team is critically important to employee engagement. So employees' definitions of we are critically important to their level of engagement. It's human nature to think of we as the people that are immediately around you, those folks that you spend the most time with. But we want to get to a point where we is the city, because we win or lose as a team. So that idea of we, I learned pretty early on, folks didn't identify with the organization as a whole. They identify with their small teams within teams. So, how do we define success? A lot of times I heard doing things right the first time. Getting it right on the first shot. And in manufacturing, I think they call that first time pass, where the first time you look at something, you pass the test. That was loud and clear, and I think that matches closely with the question of, I know what's expected of me. So those two things are relatively close together, so that didn't surprise me that that came up as a definition of success, is doing it right the first time and not going back and having to do it again. Public opinion. I heard a lot about what our residents think and say to each other. I heard about, people that get together in different groups and talk about the city. You're always going to be a topic of conversation. Whether things are going good or bad, you're always going to be on people's minds. So employees feel like whatever the public opinion is a reflection of the work that we're doing. Survival. I heard a lot of folks, from a lot of folks who are in what I call survival mode. And survival mode is, if I can make it through the day, whew, I did good. Whew. If I can at least get half the stuff checked off my list, that's a success. And again, true or untrue, you can talk about overworked, overwhelmed, whatever it is, but that feeling of being in constant survival mode actually has a physiological effect on the human body, the human brain, and the work we do. And so that rose as a concern for me. People in survival mode are not functioning at their highest level, even if they want to be. Even if they're as dedicated, the most dedicated employee you have, if they're in that survival mode mentality, they're not functioning on all cylinders, physically or mentally. So organizations that can move from survival mode to thriving mode, that's when you get the top performance. And we're pretty solid in survival mode. Just getting through the day without moving backwards. Another definition of success is lack of complaints. And that sounds highly negative, but it's a factor of the business you're in. Nobody's going to call the city and say thank you. Well, some do, but it's not, a frequent occasion. But when they're not happy, they're sure going to reach out. And that's a function of our democracy. So thank goodness for that. But it makes measuring customer satisfaction pretty difficult. If we're a website and we send out a survey and people are satisfied, that's fairly easy. You're a city. It's different. It's a different monster, and it's difficult to measure. So you're always going to have complaints. The goal is never going to be complaint-free. But our employees look to, if we can reduce that number, which sends us, when we get a complaint, it sends us into survival mode, right? If we can just get a handle on that, that means we're doing better. Does that make sense? So we're not going to get a lot of compliments, but the lack of complaints is a good sign. And then the last one gave me goosebumps. And I asked the gentleman if I can share who said it, and he said yes. So I'm going to break my rule of anonymity. It was a gentleman in your media group. that when I asked him what the definition of success was, he said, at the end of the day, I am very proud of the work I've put out. I thought, oh, that is so cool. And the cool thing is, after he said that, I heard it from others as well. So to me, that's a foundational piece that we can leverage, because this may be shocking to you guys, but nobody came to work for the city to get rich. Sorry, it just didn't happen. So there's a reason people come here. And usually there's, it might be the benefits, that's a nice perk, but usually it's a desire to serve. Otherwise they'd have gone into other work. And so if we can take pride in serving our community and define that as a level of success, doesn't that feel better?
Well, I know that, that's public sector, right?
Yeah. How cool would it be if everybody was moving forward on that? That at the end of the day, they were going, I might not have got everything done, but what I did get done was darn good and I'm proud of it. To me, that's the future. That's the building block for moving the organization forward. And that's also an indicator that you're not broken, that people are here with hope and dedication and are here with a pleasure to serve. So that's good news. All right. How do we know we're successful? Nobody had a good answer for that one. What I learned from the conversations that I had was we meaning the organization, we don't have a solid, commonly shared definition of success. I heard that we lack a vision, I heard we lack a strategy, I heard that we're siloed, I heard that we have conflicting agendas, I heard that, we're out there trying to do what we do, but we don't know what other people do. So I see an opportunity for a common shared vision, and I see an opportunity for a scorecard of some type that we can communicate that'll tell us how we're doing on that. Because when I asked the question, how do we know if we're successful, I heard, well, I know I'm trying hard. And so it became a very self-reflective thing as opposed to an organizational and team thing. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. What do we do really well? We care. I didn't hear one person say that there's somebody in the organization that doesn't care about the residents of this city. I didn't hear that ever. I heard the opposite. I heard that everybody's here because they care. Even when they're not doing it right, or they tick me off, they still care. So we care about each other, and we care about our community. May not always show, but it's an underlying factor. So that's a strength that we have. We have great people. I heard a lot of stories that I would put in the hero category. I heard a lot of dedication. Maybe not always making the right decisions, but there's a dedication underlying where we go. And I also heard that there was a lot of struggling for a word. There was a lot of appreciation for the lean training, and I know it's been a couple years since we've done that, but there was a lot of hope around that. There's disappointment that it's kind of died on the vine, but there was I heard quite a bit about that training, and people really enjoyed it and would like to see more of that type of stuff, and they put a lot of their eggs in that basket, and they're kind of sad to see that didn't take off and get some roots. What gets in our way of success? And as human nature would have it, that's what we spend our most time talking about. But first and foremost, one of the things that really has people concerned is a leadership conflict. And this is going to be one of those more difficult things that we need to talk about, but I'm here to share what I heard and be the voice of the folks that I talked to. And there's an impression that there's a disconnect in the leadership of the organization, and that there are conflicting agendas, and that politics is getting in the way of operations. I was even told that me being here is part of a political struggle. True or not, I don't know, but that's the perception from the employees. And from an operational standpoint, I want to kind of set the politics aside because that's not why I'm here. From an operational standpoint of meeting our goals and serving the community, a disconnect at a leadership level is the most detrimental thing an organization can do to being successful. Because people either have to pick sides or they have to figure out who to listen to. And that's incredibly stressful. And it actually creates a lot of emotional conflict. And it's not about who's right or who's wrong. It's not about who's in charge. It's about lack of alignment. For employees to be fully engaged, they need to feel in alignment with the organization, with their we, and know that what they're doing is contributing to something that is valued by the leadership and the people that they serve. Anybody have any questions or comments on that?
Well, I noticed how you crossed your arms when you just told us.
Yeah, it's a tough one to hear, but it was a strong message. It was a very strong message that came through loud and clear. And the feeling that I got from the employees that something has to be done. It's not a when do we do something, it's we must do something now, because it's ripping us apart. And I don't say that lightly. I don't usually come with that strong of a message, but that's how strong it came through. Anybody surprised?
I guess I'm more unsure of where that conflict is. Is it with
Okay.
council and staff? Is it, is it management and employees?
There's a
Or-
political component that is between the council and the mayor, but there's also an operational component between some senior leaders and the mayor. And I'm not throwing anyone under the bus, you're just the only one in that position. So the mayor's office, how's that? The top leadership that are trying to set the agenda. But that includes some senior operational leaders, but most of the elected officials.
Well, I think that's unfortunately the nature of an elected body is that, you get, well, in our system, you have 8 elected people, and you're not electing 8 like-minded people either. So
Right?
all those 8 potentially could have their own area of interest or passions about, which is gonna, what did I tell you last night, Tom? We spent how long debating a one-way and a two-way street, and we all had a different opinion.
And
that was
I
just a
agree with you
street.
on that. I agree with you. That's a part of the recipe. However, when that conflict gets in the way of implementing a final decision to a successful level, then it's a problem. We have to keep that conflict at that level. And right now that conflict is drifting into everyday work. And it's making it difficult to be successful. And some even told me it's making it detrimental to being successful. That they end up doing things that they know are not right and that they're not proud of. So yes, it's a function of how we operate. We have to find a way to keep it at that strategic level, to keep that conflict, because that's how we come to the best answer, is by starting at opposite places and coming to agreement.
Absolutely.
But once we come to that agreement, we have to then represent an aligned strategy with the organization. Otherwise, we do more harm than good.
I guess I'm not sure where that is funneling down into to create that, I guess that's where I'm confused on, is how that is funneling down to the employees. Our disagreement.
Here's my impression. Again, I don't live and breathe here, so I'm going to give you my impression. We don't talk fondly of each other. We let our political and preferences out at all times to all people, no matter should they have them or not. We had folks that were having conversations with persons of leadership that that conversation shouldn't have been happening. That should have been constricted to the leadership. So not only do employees have to have each other's backs, our leaders have to have each other's back. And when we go out and don't have each other's back, that causes great emotional distress in our employee base and our communities. So yes, we can disagree and we can debate, that's all wonderful, but we have to find a way of operating that doesn't detract from success. Here you go. So you are right. We need to go a little bit further than that. Any other comments on that? Okay, lack of training. And congratulations, you're normal. Training is a funny thing. When we aren't busy, we have so many other things to do, and when we aren't busy, it's not what we do. We don't have time for training. So, however, training, and especially in the younger folks joining our organizations, is the number one thing that leads to their engagement. They want to know that they have opportunities to not necessarily just promote. 20 years ago, it was about promoting, getting that next step on the ladder and more pay. Today, it's about I want to expand my thinking, my capabilities, my influence. Even if I don't get a promotion, I want to learn and grow every day. And that is getting stronger and stronger as younger folks join our organization. And short of the lean training, I heard that we don't do much. And again, that's fairly normal. Every organization is trying to do more with less. But if we want to drive performance, one of the lowest hanging fruits, the biggest bang for our buck, can be to provide some training. And not just technical skills, soft skills as well. Because today it's not just the technical skills that help us be successful, it's how we interact as a team, it's how we communicate with each other, it's how we manage our emotions. That's just as important as being able to wrench. A lot of folks felt that we don't have a focus on quality, that we're getting so wrapped up in price tags that the quality is suffering. Again, every organization is being asked to do more with less. But somehow we have to get past the idea of either it's cheap or it's good. We have to get to a place where it's cheaper and it's still good. And that's a challenge. That's a challenge in any industry. But if we're going to define success as work that we're proud of, we need to figure out how to put out a quality product at a budget-friendly price. Micromanagement. And this is a term that's thrown out there a lot. And I think this really is hand in hand with the leadership conflict. I think that employees are seeing folks who should be at a strategic level really getting into the weeds and the minutia of the day-to-day and trying to, number one, be in the know of a lot of different things, and number two, analyzing if that was the right thing or the wrong thing. And I understand the desire to do that, especially when your political career is involved. However, that is a bottleneck that is going to drive you crazy. If you have to understand and approve all decisions that are being made at all levels, wow, there needs to be 20 of you. And so what ends up happening is employees feel like that their judgment isn't trusted, which is probably not true, but that's the message they get from someone being involved in something that is maybe below their pay grade, if you will. And it can be very demeaning sometimes to have your work constantly checked or not be allowed and empowered to make decisions that impact the work you do. So micromanagement, although it looks like it's a successful formula, rarely leads to high-level success. And then the last one, I heard a lot about toxic work environments, and I think this is twofold. I think that when someone is being micromanaged, they tend to be highly judgmental of who's ever micromanaging them. When they're feeling lashed out against, they tend to lash out at others. It's kind of, the poop runs downhill idea. And I think it's also that when employees are in survival mode, they're also in victim mode. And so what might on a good day feel like a pinprick, on a bad day feels like a shotgun wound. And victims, when they get shot with a shotgun, tend to scream pretty loud. And I'm not saying that it means it's their fault, it just means they're in an emotional state where things that happen are going to be emotionally exaggerated. And a lot of folks that I talked to didn't necessarily have a lot of the skills it takes to figure out what's a pinprick and what's a gunshot wound, and how to deal with the real gunshot wounds, and how to just move on beyond the pinpricks. So I think that there's a lot of things plugging into that toxic environment label, but it's a concern. I'm gonna be honest with you. And I'm not just concerned about your organization, I'm concerned about some individuals. I heard stories that made me concerned for their well-being and their family's well-being. Again, I'm not pointing fingers at whose fault is that, but as an organization, that is something that we need to take very seriously. We want every one of our employees to be healthy and go home so they're happy, because they're also community members, and have a fulfilled employment as well as a fulfilled life. And I heard stories where work stress is getting in the way of that. Hi. I have some real concerns about the health of some of our employees and the stress level. And it's not just work that causes that stress level, but we're at work more than we're with our families. So I think we need to step back and take a look at culture. What is toxicity, and how does that impact the wellness of our employee base? Questions? Got about 10 more minutes, so I want to make sure we get through all of this. So what are my recommendations? And then I'll open it up for your recommendations and questions. The first one is that you partake in some type of strategic planning with all stakeholders. And that doesn't mean all stakeholders in the room, but all stakeholders are involved. So that there can be understanding and alignment with what is our strategy? How do we define success? How do we know if we're being successful? When I have to make a decision between being cheap or being good, how do I manage that decision? So there needs to be a common vision that drives us forward, and that starts with the leadership, and then that trickles down within the organization. Next one is, I think we need to define our desired culture, because right now employees are defining it as toxic. We need to give them better language to understand what is culture, what role do they play in culture, who are we, and where are we headed from a cultural standpoint. Because we're pretty clear on what we do, we're not clear on how we do that. And every organization, their culture is their character. Every team has a character. We're all over the map. And so we need to have some common characters, some common values that drive our culture and help us make decisions. We need a communication plan. Every time I do this, communication always rises to the top as a concern, but I think our biggest concern here was communication throughout the hierarchy, as well as communication from department to department. We are very siloed. And communication is generally one direction. And I heard a lot of gratitude for this process because they felt like communication was going both directions. So that was a good thing. We need to figure out a way to continue that. I suggest a follow-up survey, because where we're at today tells us nothing unless we can compare it to something tomorrow. We have to know if we're going blue or going red. And then we can say, well, what took us that direction? Today is just a benchmark. It's the movement that really has the impact. So I recommend a follow-up survey. And I heard a lot of folks talk about a desire for a city administrator or a city manager. Sounds like that's been a hot topic that's been tossed around a lot. I would recommend it, and I know that that's not budget friendly, But that's where you can separate what you were talking about, the politics where we need to be debating and we need to be going back and forth and have differing opinions. But then the city manager, when there's finally a decision, then the city manager puts that into a strategy. And that person is primarily operational and providing that operational guidance, communication, and vision where we can keep the politics separate. Although politics guides the vision, but it keeps it at that certain level. Questions, comments, concerns, jokes? I know this is very high level, and I can dig deeper if you so desire. I didn't think today was the venue to go that far deep. Yeah.
Will there be an opportunity for department heads to meet with you one-on-one?
I recommend that. That's not something I can decide.
Just to recap, the POV involvement, you said you had like 25 or so individuals that did the POV interviews, and you had somebody from each department to get a reflection from
Yeah.
them. And then maybe give me a sense of what, the assessment doesn't include any of the numbers of engagements, and I guess that's.
Yeah, and I can give you, it breaks down the percentages. I can give you the exact numbers. I don't know that we want to make that common knowledge throughout the organization,
I'm
but I
just
can find
making
that
sure
too.
that, we all have an
Yep.
idea of,
Yeah.
this information was reflective of 23 perspectives. And you said Public Works was a strong responder.
Mhm.
But just so we have a sense
Yep.
that maybe there's more engagement that
Yep.
could be beneficial.
And I'll be honest, I was somewhat disappointed that we didn't have more equality throughout the departments. And we tried pretty hard to make that happen. You guys gave that a lot of effort. But short of requiring this, and if we want to come back and do that, we can. Because I do not feel like I got a well-rounded point of view.
How do we compare to other municipalities that you work with? Do you see the same things?
Honestly, a lot of concerns here. And you pay me to be honest.
Say that a little bit louder,
There's a lot of concerns.
especially in comparison to other municipalities.
Yep.
Interesting.
And I'll be honest, this is the first municipality that I've worked with that doesn't have a city manager or a city administrator. I don't know if that's the reason. I'd have to dig deeper to find out. But usually that's the person that I work more directly with, and they communicate to the mayor and the council. And the council and the mayor stay at that 50,000 foot level. Again, I don't know if that's impacting this, but that is very different than what I'm used to. I saw a lot of good things that we can leverage, but there's some work to be done.
Maybe you can go back to the concerns on the first slide that you talked about in the, just revisit what those were. It's hard for me to read, but maybe you've got them in the report.
This one?
First slide, not in the POV, that's about
The one with
15.
Oh, okay, yep.
15% of our organization participated in interviews, but 95% did the survey. Yeah,
Yeah.
if you could maybe walk us through that a little bit.
Okay, you're paying me to be honest. I would recommend the city of Wisconsin Rapids as a great place to work. That's usually the highest number.
Oh,
That's a big concern. If you were a for-profit retailer, you would be out of business.
What's the number at the end? I can't see it.
The bottom one is I understand what is expected
No.
of me at work.
Up on top, behind that, on the end of the red line.
Yeah, 5.
This one?
What's that, 5?
5, 5.
Oh.
Yep. 5, 7, 8, 8, 30, 39, 28, 52. And that's a score. It's not a number of employees, it's not a percentage, it's a function of all of the different
So
responses.
5 from what?
Huh? Negative 100 to 100.
All right.
Yep, you can have a negative 100 or you could have an 100 or anything in between.
So that's 5 above negative.
Yeah.
Neutral. You said 500 below negative?
No.
100?
100 would be everybody, yes, is on board. Negative 100 is everybody is off board.
So So you have 200,
Yeah.
you have 200 points spanned.
Let me give you a reference.
I-
Normally, it's between 60 and 80,
Okay.
and you're at
We didn't
5.
even hit 60 on any of them.
Yeah, you're at 5.
So I was just curious as to.
Anything over 50 is positive. Anything under 50 is a concern.
We don't do very well with coworkers either.
But again, it's not the numbers that are the goal. It's how these feelings and emotions impact the work we do. And they impact productivity, which is quality, it's timeliness, it's dedication. It impacts customers, how our customers feel about us. It impacts the safety of the work we do. And it impacts if people stay or go. Yeah.
The toxicity of people's feelings, was that in the personal point of view, or was that in the overall?
In the POV, we talked about toxicity. If I saw this without any other information, I would know you had a toxic culture.
Okay, now, is that just for the people that were interviewed? Were they management or below management?
Both. I had a good balance on both sides. But this was the majority of your employees. And this is concerning. This is good. That's something we can build on. There's a, whoops, sorry. There's opportunities here. And a lot of things that we can take and work on. My coworkers share my values. That's a great opportunity to start talking about what are our common values, how do we talk about them, because people think values, oh, that's just mine and I'm not going to share. But if we have common ones, that's when we start to realize that my coworkers have my back because we share those values. There's some good news here, but there's also some concerns that we need to think about. Yeah.
So just to what you had just said there, where there isn't a confidence that the employee has their back or whatever, is that possible because you have, let's just say 25% of less than 3 years being employees, so there maybe isn't quite the trust level of a fellow employee because they haven't been working shoulder to shoulder for a long period of time, or?
I haven't seen that to be true.
Okay.
I'm not going to say it's not true here. I'd have to dig in more. I can look at the tenure-based and how, I don't have it in front of me, or I would. I can look at how we answered. Other organizations, I haven't seen that to be true. Normally, it's the opposite. That when I'm a new employee, I expect others to have my back and I have their back. And then that gradually decreases. And I also have seen when someone feels like one person doesn't have their back, that influences how they look at their entire team. Now, that's not saying that that's what's happening, but that can be a factor here too. The number one thing I recommend, that I think I skipped over pretty quickly, the best way to start dealing with this is training your coaches. And I think you guys are set up that your coaches are your supervisors. Really giving them tools and ideas and things that they can do to really start this in a different direction. Actually. So, coaching your coaches, helping them define clear expectations, which is a strength that we need to leverage. We're doing a good job of that now. We need to give our supervisors that support, because the number one tool to drive engagement is coaching. And then to provide individual development, whether that's through formalized training or on an individualized basis. And then the last one is to look at performance management. Really, how do we provide that guidance to employees? Normally when we think about performance management, we think about that annual performance review that I don't think you guys do. I think I heard that you don't do that. Don't start doing that. We can start doing other things, but we need to look at evidence-based solutions And by evidence-based solutions, I mean things that have been researched to actually have an impact on employee engagement. And we can put those into play and possibly bring back the lean programming and look at positive reinforcement of that. The personal accountability training, I think, is really important, and that's for all employees. And when we talk about accountability, people think of accountability as I'm going to hold you accountable. My supervisor holds me accountable. My boss tells me what to do and holds me accountable. That's not what drives success. Personal accountability is I have high standards for myself, and it's unacceptable for me to not meet those. That's personal accountability. And that takes a shift in culture, and it takes a shift in thinking, and it takes coaching to get someone from I'm a victim to I'm personally accountable. And I think that would be something that would really help this organization, because there's always going to be, around every solution to a problem, there's going to be another problem. It's going to happen. We're going to have multiple blizzards. And if the first blizzard, I just throw my hands in the air and go, oh, there's nothing I can do, I'm helpless, well, it's going to be a long winter. And so we need to help our employees understand, what do I do when there's a blizzard so I can remain resilient and personally accountable no matter what gets thrown at me. Because employees are trying to stop having things thrown at them. That's not realistic. Sorry, I forgot my last 2 slides. That is the end, though. Any other questions? I just want to thank you. This is, oh, yep.
I have a question about
Sure.
engagement. When you first started talking about engagement, I always sense that it's as much as you put in as you get out, right? That's the value. And it seemed like the neutral or the fence folks, that's where the opportunity lies. And so in some of those other areas, what did you sense that folks were willing to engage and had an appetite to engage more? And what would incentivize those folks to engage?
I had some really great conversations. There were some situations, and I don't want to dig in deep because I don't want to give away who I was talking to, but I talked to a lot of people who were really deep in survival mode and deep in victim mode. And so we started talking about why that is, and I started talking about how it could look different. And just in that short time, I had people walking away going, oh, never thought of it that way. We didn't change any of their circumstances. We just changed how they were thinking about it. And honestly, although supervisors are the key to moving people toward engagement, it is a relationship. If you don't want to be personally engaged, there's nothing I can do to help you get there. So it's a combination of helping people be personally accountable, which opens them up to different ways of looking at things, and then having a coach that supports them when they get there and taking them to great places. It's a relationship. People often ask me, is trust given or earned? Earned. I used to say it's given. Let me tell you why I said it's given. Because if Dawn decides that she doesn't trust me, it doesn't matter how fast I tap dance or how much money I give her, she chooses whether she's going to trust me or not. Her trust is given. That's what I used to think. Now I believe trust is a relationship of 2 people who are willing to give it. And I look at being trustworthy. If I'm focused on being trustworthy, and I'm bringing my trust into a relationship where she's also bringing her trust and trying to be trustworthy, that's where trust happens. It's not earned, it's not given, it's a relationship. But if one person isn't willing to give, it's not going to happen. And I would like to introduce you guys to Cy Wakeman, Cywakeman. She's a phenomenal consultant, author. She works with Facebook, she works with international organizations. Her motto is that buy-in is not optional. If you have an organization that has a strategy and they put it out there and someone isn't buying into that strategy, it is their responsibility to figure out how they're going to figure out how to buy in. Because that's where the team is going. So if I'm refusing to buy into the strategy, that's my choice. But I should probably be exiting that situation. Because me not buying in isn't gonna change the strategy. So I either have to stay in peace, or I have to stay in joy, or leave in peace. You guys have people that are trying to stay in misery and change the situation. And that misery has become very toxic. So we need to be better as an organization, we need to have a clear strategy, and then we need personally accountable people who are buying in and moving that strategy forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I will get those pieces to those folks who asked for questions.
Okay.
Sorry, I went 7 minutes over.